So I'm Steve Hall, and we're going to talk today about the Consultative Employment Training and Supports Fidelity Scale. The Consultative Employment Training and Supports Fidelity Scale is the third and final of three scales that encourages practitioners of customized employment to do that work with fidelity to best practices. That is, meaning that those practices that we have evidence that is likely that if at least these tenets are followed, there's a lot more to all of discovery and all of customized job development and all of consultative employment training supports, besides these tenets, of course. But at least if these tenets, this skeleton, I prescribe it if it can be think of customized employment as a body. So this is not the muscles and the tendons and the blood system and the brains and the nervous system and all that. No, this is what this is the skeleton. We have some good evidence that doing these sorts of things will make a difference. Note that we have a published article out in the Journal of Vocational Rehabilitation, and two more about the Discovery Fidelity Scale, consensus among experts, and two more publications coming out. One is a consensus among experts on the Customized Job Development Fidelity Scale, and then another on now we have data for implementation of the Discovery Fidelity Scale. So we have Cronbach alpha scores looking at reliability, predictability of this discovery practice. And on the Discovery Fidelity Scale, the results are really excellent. So we're thrilled with that. We've removed a tenet because of that, of the results of that, which is great. Gave us even more reliability, and modified one tenet, not extensively, but necessarily. And then another tenet, just changed one word. And so that's it. So the new version that you'll have in May of both the Discovery Fidelity Scale and the consultative, the Customized Employment Job Development Scale have it has minor wording modifications. But what we're going to talk about today is the Consultative Employment Training and Supports Fidelity Scale. And so know that the development of this scale, like all others, was based on interviews, focus groups, Likert scales, and extensive literature research. And when I say interviews with others that are doing this work, absolutely, I listened to what experts had to say, but I also listened about what the people who are implementing customized employment, and some that are implementing as job coaches for support employment, what they had to say about that work. So Consultative Employment Training Supports Fidelity Scale is after hire. And that we usually had been considered the domain of the job development. But as you'll see from this is, the domain of job coaching. But as you can see, consultative employment specialist work is very different than the work of a job coach delivering supported employment. So let's get started about what some of those differences are. So first big difference, the coworker is primarily responsible for skill and task training. So in other words, the job coach is not the person responsible for training and teaching the new employee the skills and tasks of the job. A coworker is primarily responsible for that. And when I mean primarily, I mean that's the person that does it. So that's understood right from the beginning. And because of the long history of supported employment, the decades of support employment, some employers actually need to be certain that they understand that customized employment is a very different way of going about after hire, what happens, and that the person responsible is going to be a coworker. Now, when I say the word coworker, I mean coworker, supervisor, or whoever usually trains other persons there. So that's a one big difference. Second one is that the customized employment job developer remains during the initial training. Before it was that, well, the job developer, their job was to be sure to find a job, and then as soon as and then if they stayed, it was a model where they were continued to be the job coach, then of course that continued like that. But in models of some agencies who provided this service, usually support employment, provided that service, then the job developer leaves to go out and get somebody else a job. And so, well, this isn't that at all. Instead, what this is that job developer remains. And I won't get into the details of that, but so at minimum, if there is a split, if it's a different persons do the job, in other words, if the person that's doing the consultative training and support is different than who is doing the customized job development, that overlap is about 2 weeks. The third thing is many more tools are used than systematic instruction. The major tool are almost the total significant way that a job coach was able to teach and train someone is through the use of systematic instruction. And when I was on the doc program at VCU, and then the folks who were getting their master's degrees in support employment, of course, that's what my role was, to help them learn how to implement systematic instruction at a real employment site with real folks with disabilities, and as a part of their master's degree program. Well, this is saying there's many more tools than that. Many more than just systematic instruction are used. Again, the purpose of today is an introduction to this. We'll not be getting into what all those are, but many more will be used. Oh, and know that if you'd like to get a copy of by the way, this scale, the Consultative Employment Training and Supports Fidelity scale, it should be available at the Griffin-Hammis website after May, maybe before then, but I can say for sure, or likely after May. And today available there is the, if you'd like to look at the Discovery Fidelity scale, and also the customized employment job development Fidelity scale. Both of those are available for you to look at. Of course, to be authorized to use those scales, you'll need instruction. You'll need to go through the research protocol that we're going through to make certain that they are implemented with again, fidelity to best practice, that they are implemented reliably, and so that we get the type of results that we are getting, and through the university approved research protocol that we are following and entering data with the university. So many more tools. We'll talk about some of those probably along this way, but then systematic instruction. And then the fourth is, again, surprise to many. This actually has gone on for a long time, and this is nothing new to vocational rehabilitation. But the coworker primary responsible training may be compensated. That is that the compensated, I mean, through government funds, such as vocational rehabilitation funds, or it could be Medicaid funds. That is that the person actually doing that work, is a person knows how to do that work. I mean, just imagine a life. Imagine this: you're trying to get citizens who have significant challenge to employment jobs, but the bridge to community life is just that one the bridge is just a job coach, just that person, and all that they may know in their life experiences, what that is. And just imagine that, well, how that might expand is if you had an actual person who's doing the training and teaching someone with a significant disability how to do that work, is a person who's an expert who actually has the skills to do that. In fact, Medicaid, the law says that Medicaid dollars nor rehabilitation dollars, not a penny, should be spent and given to anybody who does not have the skills to perform the work. And because of that, I believe it's why, and myself included as a large provider of supported employment, many years ago, I believe that, that there was a significant issue of people only getting jobs that were low skilled, were menial labor, glorified chores may be taken to scale, mopping, sweeping, picking, packing, taking out things that discardable materials of whatever kind in whatever fashion. The reason why so many people with disabilities got those type of jobs, I believe, is because of the limited skills of the job coach. In other words, inherently, they did not know all that would take to do a job that it would be unique to whatever business or vocational theme of that job developer, whatever within that person's vocational themes. In other words, the uniqueness of any business and any industry or any type of work then calls for the person to do that work as it would anybody, any place, any employee, to be done by that coworker primarily responsible for that training. What we're saying here is that person can be compensated as the professional that can deliver the psychosocial habilitation and rehabilitation service. And of course, the person that is a consultative person is still there. They're not gone, but they're still there, but also, and again, well, that's enough on that. So participation in fully integrated non-work is necessary, another finding. And it's like, so what we're finding is this: if a person employed is not participating in fully integrated non-work, things that don't have anything to do with work, and if instead they are in congregated, segregated, isolated with other people with disabilities, if they're in a day center or say a workshop setting, enclave, it's something that where they're alongside other citizens with disabilities, pretty much as has been the case for citizens with disabilities prior to the creation of integrated employment initiatives such as support employment and customized employment, then it interferes with the outcome of the work. And it interferes in multiple ways. Won't get into all those, but one big way is that if the person is, if it being picked up conveniently by transportation, certainly is a big factor, conveniently, and taken to the day center and brought back to the group home or back to their parents' home or wherever that is. If that is the case, and then on a couple of days of the week, or maybe even many as three or four, that it means the family or someone else is providing that transportation, just the significant inconvenience of that difference can really wreak havoc on the viability of that job, particularly under bad weather conditions. And just that the interference, the cognitive interference with the person is still tied to the world of the disability world instead of to the world where the rest of us live. That is one of meaningful work. Customary and ordinary methods of performing work tasks are very important. So it isn't that with consultative training and support methodology, it isn't that your task is not to just tell me what work it is and then I'll figure out what I can do by writing a task analysis and then writing some type of a training plan that will work. With consultative training and support is that you must you must use customary and ordinary methods to perform that work. In other words, there needs to be a deep dive, real learning of what is the customs, the language, everything about that particular employment setting that is customary and ordinary, so that in the context of the work tasks that the person's performing, they're performing those within that context. And the next one, training work cultural skills, is as important as job skills. That's a giant premise. That in other words, what we had thought is that, well, if the person can do the work and it can do that well, then that's that pretty well covers it, doesn't it? And we're finding out, that's not necessarily the case at all. Instead, that the training of work cultural skills and all that entails. And there's many, I won't, again, not to point today to go into what all the details of what are these things called work culture skills and what does all that mean. That's not the point of today, but to know that is covered in great detail, in greater detail within the scale itself, about what those work cultural details are and how to perform those with fidelity to best practice. And just about this skills thing, let's just understand this, that none of us, any one of you that are listening to this that have a good job, you didn't know how to do that job before you got it. You did not know how to do that job before you got the job. And because that's a definition of a good job, is you learn things after you get the job. Somebody who is there likely taught or trained you how to do that job. So know that is a really key piece. The idea of finding out what skills a person has and then going to find out what employer might need those skills is not how any of us got our job. Yes, we had some skills, we had some knowledge about what we needed for that job, but in no way did we have the skills necessary. Somebody was there who was a coworker, a supervisor, a trainer, somebody was there that likely was very important. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but for that. So let's know that this idea of skills, the idea of skills, where they're learned is from that coworker there at the job, as we learned them, as everyone else did, okay? Negotiation is continuous. In other words, there's not that such a thing as getting a job where folks already, okay, here's the job. I'm the employer and I'm going to propose this work. You want it or not? That's not reality at all with anyone. In fact, employers have said, it's about time somebody actually told me the truth. Whenever I ask a new employee, hey, can you do this? Okay, hey, can you do this? Do you have experience doing this? Do you have this? Their answer is yes, 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 yes on everything. Anything I ask. Can you fly the moon? Yes. They'll say whatever it is necessary, if you will, to impress the employer to get a job in some other way. And of course, when they find out, then after they got the job, there were some gaps and some holes. Of course, there are. There would be that gaps and holes for any of us, of course, in any new job. And what this is saying, this proposal is an honesty that says we're going to negotiate right from the get-go that there will be parts likely of that of whatever job may be conceived by the employer that will not be even job portions that will be amenable to training and success. So we're just saying that right out front, and we make that negotiation beginning with negotiating the job, because remember, as Kerry Griffin a long time said, is if it's not negotiated, it's not customized, and that's what the difference, one of the big differences are. So negotiation is continuous all the way through these processes. So here's 4 revelations that we found. One I hit on already. Good job is not a place where the employment seeker already has the skills necessary to do the job before they're hired. A good job is a job where the seeker learns necessary skills to do after they're hired. So that's a big deal. So you're not, yes, good to know what skills a person has, but more importantly, for the consultative employment training specialist, and you learn this during discovery, how does that person learn and how are they best supported? How does that person learn and how they best supported? Because you're going to need to know that to be able to advise and support the person that's primarily going to deliver that training, which is that coworker. So for the consultative person to be worth their salt, if you will, how they must know how that person learned and how they're best supported, and a whole bunch of other things. Second revelation: the other systems incentivize day services, group home services, and those negatively impact individuals' employment success. So what we know is that, as I hinted, maybe more than hinted at before, is that employment works best when it's congruent in its beliefs about someone, both in where they live and where they work and how they go about their life in the community. And so that is may need support in all three of those I just mentioned, but that's very different than being in day services and all that it entails. That is so different than anything that represents a complete or a necessary life in the community, and certainly in any type of segregated type of employment or or group living situation with other adults that you didn't know before you were there, and you're living with them, likely maybe even the rest of your lives. So we know that. And so some of this then is built into the scale on employment about what might you do in the systems pieces to ensure that you move towards better fidelity to best practices by dealing with issues that aren't directly related to employment. The new employee needs at least a supervisor or coworker who believes in them. And every one of you that are listening to this, if you have a good job, you had at least a single supervisor or a coworker who believed in you. It turns out that becomes one of the most important findings in the research we did for the construction of the consultative employment training and fidelity scale, that becomes very most important. This idea of going off somewhere and having a job coach teach and train somebody as if that's good enough, if they can have those skills, if they can learn whatever skills that they're expected to do at that job, is not only not good enough, it won't lead to lasting employment or any number of hours of employment that will be in any way meaningful in the person's life. So supervisor, coworker who believes in them. Assimilation, that is fitting into the work culture. Well, isn't that good? No, it's not. Without accommodation or changes, that's not inclusion. In other words, the idea that, okay, our job is to learn that work culture and be sure the person is able to fit into whatever that is. Without that work culture, without accommodations or changes that might be necessary. And we're not talking about just accommodations that have to do with raising the desk a little higher, making the aisles a little wider, or any of those type of physical accommodations. In fact, I'm not just addressing those at all. I mean cultural accommodations. Culture of how you go about doing some things are very different with a consultative model of training and support. So this is the systems tenets. So I'll go through the systems tenets, and some of this will be redundant to what I've said. Some of it won't be, but this is what. So as with the other scales, there's a system component and there's a services component. Here was a big surprise for me. In the systems component, in the other two scales, I believe both scales had 5 systems components. The discovery fidelity scale had 5 systems components. that had to do with how the system would support and certainly not interfere with fidelity to best practices. How same thing with customized job development, what was necessary. Here's the big surprise. In the consultative employment training support, my incomplete prediction that it would have far fewer. After all, the person already has the job. They're working at an employer. The system obviously must have backed off big time, because remember, they front loaded this with discovery and with customized job development. Now where all it's left to do is to be sure the person can do, works and is trained to do the job. No. Seven systems components in the consultative scale. Found out that the system comes roaring back. In other words, we knew that when people were doing discovery for the fidelity best practices, that if they went into traditional job development, it was blown. In other words, that job development, job finding, where the job developer is already out there looking to see what employers need skills, where job openings are, who is hiring, what businesses typically will hire people with disabilities. We knew if you went about that, then, and no matter how well discovery was done, then it's over. I mean, it's not over, meaning that person's going to get a job. It's not going to last. It's not going to be good. They're not going to be their ideal conditions of employment. They're going to come back to voc rehab again and again until they don't want to and say you're unemployable. So all that we knew. And then we found, yes, consultative, then it turns out after job development, then, oh, wait a minute, when you move then to the training for whatever work it may be, then all the good work of customized employment job development, true job development, not job finding, and a great job on discovery, we're still wasted if you did not implement how that training and teaching and learning that job was done by using a consultative model rather than a job coach model. So that's the difference there. Okay, so the co-workers, a primary trainer, the CE job developer, and the consultative employment specialist, they work together for a few weeks. I mentioned that. If they are not the same person, obviously, if they're the same person, they're working together because it's the same person, obviously. Customized job developer and consultative employment wages are equivalent. This is one of the tenets in the systems tenet. So that's again, data research showing that people that do job developing then are paid significantly more than people that are responsible for doing what had been considered as job coaching. We're saying with customized employment that the customized job developer and the consultative employment specialist wages, if they're not equivalent, then it will have an interference, and it will have a negative impact on the likely success and lasting success of that person's ideal conditions of employment. Training and support for transition from job coaching to consultative training. We know this. It takes a lot of training and support to get out of the mindset of assessment and evaluation, finding out what the person does well and what the person doesn't do so well. Strengths and weaknesses type of way of thinking about reality. That is not how to ever do this now. We know that. So that's why you can't fail discovery. Discovery is an alternative to assessment and evaluation. There's no do this and don't do this. What discovery is about is finding out who this person really is, and so it's all from a absolutely strengths and potential and opportunities and possibilities perspective. Customized job development again is not about finding a job, but instead is we're only going to go to places where everybody there has, except for maybe a few, have the exact same vocational themes as the employment seeker. I mean, what an idea. I mean, if you're going to be a vocational rehabilitation counselor, I mean, wouldn't it be kind of a good idea if you wanted to know something about it? I think it's maybe what I want to do. Then wouldn't it be a good idea to go to where people are doing vocational counseling and talk with them? Well, this is obviously anybody would do that. Or that's a good idea to find out if you want to do some type of work, go find out and talk to people who are doing that type of work. And that's what's changed here. That's what we're doing now. And so that's what and in that transition of people from doing assessment evaluation to discovery, from doing job finding to doing for the first time real job development, and from doing job coaching to consultative training and support, that requires training and support to make those transitions. Interagency transition financing needs to happen in that last quarter of training. Simply said this: if Voc Rehab is paying for this, if Voc Rehab is paying for discovery, if they're paying for customized job development, and then they're paying for consultative training and support, what this is saying is not so fast. Because I know what's coming would be they will finish that payment there. This is what we don't want. They will finish that payment there through the training, and then who will pick up is that long-term ongoing support agency. You know, it can be intellectual and developmental disabilities, Medicaid funded usually in some way, or there's lots of other potential ways to fund that. The point is this: no, that should not just fund the ongoing support and follow along piece. It needs to come in here in the last quarter, 75 to 80% of when the consultative training and support is done. That transition needs to happen right then. In other words, before training is completed, vocational rehabilitation needs to pull back from its funding role. Still means they're waiting for that all to happen, finished for that status 26, or if they don't go by numbers today, whatever that status is for closure. But my point is that that needs to happen, the transition at the same time. And the reason why, of course, if there's a hidden agenda, it's simply this: it's the money. The money needs to be that the investment needs to come from the long-term support and follow alongside needs to be equivalent to the sort of funding that was also provided. In other words, we don't need to suddenly begin having the people that support all this great investment and work that's happened usually by vocational rehabilitation. We don't need it to collapse into somebody who is less trained or not trained and is making far less wages or earnings. So in other words, we need to have somebody that is equivalent again to the performance of the other folks that's doing the ongoing support and follow along. Now, I won't. Is it ideal if one person? Is it even an issue if it's one person doing all of it? No, it's not an issue. But the issue comes when somebody's really great at doing customized job development and really great at doing consultative employment training and support and really great at doing discovery, that all of a sudden you're saying, oh, by the way, as you begin growing, you're going to not do any of those things. Instead, you're going to do ongoing follow-along support, where you're going to end up with a person that's wanting to think, I think I'll go get a job somewhere else where I can do discovery, consultative job development, and do ongoing follow-along support. So to prevent that from happening, for that not to happen, then the person, we believe that there's a difference in that training piece needs to change. And what we're getting at in a long-winded way, I suppose, is saying those rates need to be the same. So that one day when that 75% mark is hit, that person is receiving consultative employment training and support. The next day, it doesn't suddenly, that's not worth 10 or 15 bucks less or whatever that may be seen, but it's worth exactly the same, of course, and hopefully that will be, of course, the same person delivering those services if possible. As I mentioned before, participation in integrated non-work settings when not working. Again, there's a powerful financial incentive to group people, to allow billing and people in 10-20 ratios or 3-to-1 ratios. There's a lot of incentives in non-work settings for the financial incentives to the providers to do that work. We need to be sure we address that, and also be sure that the adequate dollars are moving to community access services and other services that promote integrated community life other than just when working. Services tenants. Customary and ordinary ways. I mentioned that before about be sure you learn what that is with employer. No consulting about me without me, right? So all throughout every process from discovery through customized job development and consultative training and supports with Fidelity, that you make sure that citizen, the employment seeker is right there. Yeah, I know the business's standard training and communication practices are one of the tenets of learning what they are. When it says and communication practices, equal, absolutely equal. How do they go about communicating? What words? Where are don't go there? Don't communicate with them. Communicate with these folks. Not only who and how you communicate is critical understanding and success. And direct and additional training is needed. It's like not so fast. Not so fast. As it turns out, for some of the training and skills that are necessary, it may need some intensive training by the consultative employment training and support specialist using systematic instruction. Aha! So it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Yes, we're gonna be sure there's going to be times where that person is going to maybe for a few hours, for a few days, for a few weeks, for some component of what is needed teaching and training may require that consultative training and support specialist to do the direct and additional training as needed, just like that they did entirely for support employment. So know that is absolutely still there. Work culture training. More to say about this. We got 2 days worth to say about this. Won't say anything about this. Just know that learn everything you can about everything about work cultural training and how that might work. And I'm hoping that people will be developing some excellent training and realize, wow, we never realized all of this is what really determines the success or failure of any jobs. You negotiate reasonable accommodations. I've talked about that. And when I say reasonable accommodations, think of it broadly as you can ever think about that, of what might be an accommodation, what we've seen before. It's right in there in the law. Reasonable accommodations, people with disabilities are expected and are guaranteed. Now let's be sure that we're doing that and not just thinking about physical accommodations or minor accommodations, but or narrow accommodations, but what all might be conceptualized as a reasonable accommodation to that. I mean, sometimes it's just somebody speaking louder. Sometimes it's just whatever may be. Maybe it's allowing somebody to walk or to move about in an area that has before been off limits. We don't know what that might be, but it's whatever accommodations might work. And then continuous, never-ending accommodation and negotiation. So to know that doesn't change. It is. Remember this: after vocational rehabilitation is no longer paying, when the ongoing support and follow-along resources that are helping them are paying minuscule amounts of money, when they're not paying much at all for the person, they're just dropping in, say, every other month or whatever to see what's going on. What's still happening here is a psychosocial habilitation and rehabilitation methodology that is extremely cost effective to taxpayers, because guess what? That's happening now without any cost to taxpayers, or with very little cost to taxpayers. That's when people talk about benefits, cost benefit on these methodologies. It costs some money up front. Discovery, they don't give away discovery that's done well. They don't give away customized job developments done well, and they don't give away consultative employment training and supports that are done well. But boy, does it deliver downstream with the, and everybody says, oh yeah, you always make promises. We got data now. The difference is we have, that's what Fidelity, the whole point of Fidelity and doing these scales is, so that we can absolutely walk our talk and prove it. And that is that a very effective habilitation, psychosocial habilitation and rehabilitation methodology is happening long after paid human service personnel are not involved. Thank you very much for listening in and hearing about the consultative employment training and supports Fidelity scale. If you'd like to see the other two, thanks to Terry Blankenship and others at Virginia Commonwealth University, the other two are also available. One on the Discovery Fidelity scale, and one on the customized employment job development Fidelity scale. Thank you, and take care.